problems, and therefore one of its biggest.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody today to the April 4th, 2016 HART Board meeting, and we'll start off with our Pledge of Allegiance. If y'all could stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and do we have the excuse for... Okay. Chairman Suarez is out of town. He is on business. So I will be in his place for today. The first agenda item we have here is the approval of the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes. A second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Very good. The next order of business would be the public input on agenda items, and we have Mr. Gary Cloyd signed up to speak. Welcome.
Good morning, board members. Gary Cloyd, Connect Tampa Bay. I just had one question in regards to action item 2C and 2D that relates to the bus and transit vehicle appropriation money. I wanted to find out how the FAST Act is going to help you with that, given that that was released within the last 3 or 4 months.
Would you like to respond, Ms. Egan?
And thank you, Mr. Cloyd. I'll touch on that in my CEO report later in today's meeting.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no more sign-ups, is there any other member of the public who'd like to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll go right into our 2017 budget overview, and Mr. Jeff Seward is here to present that. Welcome, Mr. Seward.
Good morning. Jeff Seward, Chief Financial Officer for HART. It is that time of year again. We are beginning the work on next year's fiscal year's budget. And as we have done every year, I want to come before you and just give you a quick one overview of where we're working on within the structure of the FY16 budget right now, as just sort of a refresher on where we came from. And an overview of our plans for the FY17 budget. What we're looking at as far as potential revenues, our plans and direction for the organization as far as expenditure caps for next year, and specifically what types of service you'll be seeing as far as an enhanced in next year's budget. So just a quick overview of our current operating budget. These percentages that you see as far as revenues are not unlike previous years. The majority of our funding does come from property tax, as you well know. Our budget stands around 50% from property tax alone, around $34 million per year. Passenger fares at 25%, and our federal formula grants, which I'll have a continued discussion with you today about, stands at about 14%. And again, this is operating. Typically, transit agencies across the country utilize that federal formula funding for capital. And we are in our third year of what we're calling a recalibration of moving those capital dollars back into capital from operating. And I'll talk to you about that in a few minutes. Our operating expenses, as you can see from the bottom of the graph, the majority of our expenditures at HART focus on our mission. That is transporting our passengers throughout Hillsborough County and the support of our vehicles. From parts and supplies, fuel and oil, fringe benefits, and those employees that support not only the operators that do the work every day, but the support function as well, consume the majority of our operating expenses. So I think it's important to point out as we move forward with the planning of FY17's budget that the majority of our expenditures in this organization go directly to the mission. There's not a lot of overhead. There's not a lot of fluff in the budget at all. It is wheels on the road. And that's something that we have built consistently in our budgets in the last few years, and will do so into the future. Just a quick overview of our position breakdown. Wanted to just give a quick overview of how our employees are broken down functionally in the organization. We have our collective bargaining folks in the ATU and their bus and van operators, customer service reps, mechanics, and our inventory specialists. Our Teamsters, our maintenance and transportation supervisors and dispatchers. And then we have our non-bargaining, which of course is the executive leadership team, management, professional staff, and our administrative support. And without going through the pie graph, you can see exactly how those are broken out within our current FY16 budget. Now, just as all other governmental budgets, we cap ourselves based on the approved FTEs from the board during the FY16 budget approval process, meaning whatever FTE count that you approve in the operating budget is the cap for us for the year. We cannot increase that count without coming back before the board with a budget amendment and a business case for bringing that FTE count higher. So this is what we have right now in FY16, 820.81 FTEs, and the breakdown for those employees. This is the 5-year look ahead. Those of you that have been on the board for a few years, this is not a new graphic that we show. The numbers do change every year, once or twice in a year actually, but it's something that we like to show you, a projection of where we think we'll be financially over the next 5 years. And of course, based on all financial models, there are a whole series of assumptions, and assumptions can change and do change quite frequently. What we have in front of you on the far left column, FY16, that is the budget that I just showed you a few minutes ago, the overview of our estimated revenues and expenditures for the current year that we are in. Our preliminary FY17 budget, and I say preliminary because it is only staff level work at the moment. It has not been vetted through the executive team nor the board. That will come in the next few months as we solidify exactly what we're looking at in revenues and expenditures. But right now, this is based on our best guess. And property valuations in 17, we have a 6% growth rate built in. The State Department of Revenue right now is forecasting a 7.9% increase for Hillsborough County. But those of you that know and have seen this before know that we are very conservative in our estimating. We do not want to overestimate what we may have and make plans thereof and then not be able to deploy or deliver those. So it is a conservative approach. FY18 to FY21 is based on a conservative 3.5% ad valorem growth rate. So although we are experiencing 6, 7, 8% ad valorem growth rates, we are not comfortable extrapolating that all the way out for the next 5 years. So again, it's conservative. In FY17, you'll see the expenses are flat over 16. When we get to the direction that we're giving the organization, that direction will be you are to come in flat or under where you were in FY16. So again, it could change as time goes on as we find out there are some inflators and some contracts, some additional FTE needs, and so on. But that is our goal right now, is to come in flat on expenditures of where we are this year. Based on that, we are looking at a $3.1 million overage in revenues over expenditures. Again, that's the first cut, and I can almost guarantee you that will not last. We will end up, based on revenue changes and expenditures, I don't see that we'll have that much left over at the end of the year. But again, it is just an assumption right now. You go all the way out to FY21. That is the first time you'll see any type of deficit based on revenues not meeting our expenditures. And again, remember, that's based on a 3.5% ad valorem growth rate. 3 years ago, this 5-year look ahead had red in every year but the first 2 years. That's an achievement and something that we want to continue to carry forward. Again, there are no guarantees in the financial modeling realm, but it is something that we've held very fast to in restricting the growth of expenditures only to service on the street and to support and building HART to support whatever is in our future. So we take this very seriously where we don't want to see any red at all, ever. Will that be the case? We can't look at it 5-10 years, but our goal here is to ensure that we are balanced with an overage every year as much as we can moving out into the next 5 years.
Yes.
questions now, or we
If you have a
after-
clarifying one now, ask it now, please.
Explain to me why, in all of the years across from 16 to 21, everything seems steady except for formula takes a dip, and that's why we have the red deficit. What happens there? I mean, that's just projection, but.
I am going to answer that question. 2 more slides, if I
Okay.
can.
All right, okay.
You'll notice the fare increases. The fare revenue does not reflect fare increases in FY17 or any of the out years. The last fare increase we had was in FY 2012, and within our policy, it does state that we will review fare increases and fare policy each year. Right now, it is not anticipated that we will be coming before the board asking for a fare increase for FY17. I therefore have left all the out years with no fare increase. But again, each year we'll come back and have that discussion. The formula, which again I'll come back to in a few minutes, is based on the calibration. That's why it's reducing, but I'll get in more detail in a couple of minutes. And again, this 5-year outlook reflects the service model that HART has today. Within that transit development plan in which we are responsible by the state of Florida to produce each year, this model reflects the current state of affairs and our current service model. It doesn't reflect Go Hillsborough. It doesn't reflect any new revenue source. It reflects the state of HART as it exists today financially. These are historic operating and capital budgets. It's just for a reference to see where we have been and where we are now. Again, over the last few years, we've had a modest increase since FY14 in the operating budget. Historic property tax revenues. I want to draw your attention to that FY16 10.35% increase. This percent change actual does not equate to property value increases. It means the amount of change that HART collects from ad valorem. Just like all other governmental entities in the state of Florida that rely on ad valorem and property taxes, we are at the whim of those that pay property taxes. So in the years where there is a low collection rate and there are more liens placed on property, et cetera, it affects us. It affects our ability to pull in that ad valorem, and that's what you see reflected there. And that's why the state of Florida mandates that you only budget 95% of your ad valorem going into the fiscal year based on the potential of lack of payment. Okay. Commissioner Miller, this will answer your question. FTA Section 5307 formula funding. Each year, a decision was made back in the 2008-2009 timeframe due to the downturn in ad valorem and the economy that the federal formula funding would be moved from capital to support operating so there would be no reduction in service. Now that ad valorem is starting to increase, our goal is to start to shift without increasing the expenditure side. We want to decrease the amount of the federal formula funding going to operations and shifting it back into capital. It wasn't an issue a few years ago because we had a very large capital budget. If you look back at FY, wrong one, sorry. FY13, FY11, FY12, FY13, we had an $85, $77, $40 million capital budget, which was primarily due to 2 things. The President's Grow America package and the county CIT tax. the CIT program. That's where the majority of that funding came from. Now that all that has been used up, there is no more available funding outside of grants, and they're pretty small. Our capital budgets are shrinking to the point where in FY17 we're probably looking at around a $12 to $13 million capital budget, which is over an 80% decrease over the last 4 years. So what we're trying to do on this slide, you'll see we're trying to recalibrate. We're trying to shift the amount of federal formula funding from operating to capital. So when you look at this slide and the 5-year outlook, this represents that decrease in federal formula funding going to operating and getting shifted back to capital.
So it takes that long for it to kick in.
That's as long as we're overnight, but we would have to supplant that operating money that it currently supports with some other type of operating funding, and we wouldn't be able to meet the TDP requirements for our enhancements that we have planned. Later on, we're going to go over what the FY17 enhancements of service are going to be. If we were to just suddenly just go cold turkey and flip, we wouldn't be able to do those enhancements. We have to do it gradually. I do see a time when we'll be able to possibly speed it up in the next couple of years, but this is a very conservative approach to that swap, and that's how we're managing it and planning right now.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Egan, would you like to comment as well?
Yes, thank you. And to piggyback on Jeff's points, Commissioner, in a nutshell, the federal funding for most entities goes completely into capital. This is vehicle replacement, this is facility improvements, the whole 9 yards. In 8 and 9, when we had the downturn, we committed to keeping service on the street, also to keeping folks employed. Through the recession, we did not lay off any mechanics or any of our hourly staff. We shrank our admin staff, but we kept folks employed and we kept service on the street so that people out there who needed us could get to their jobs as well. But it's time to start putting that money back into capital. Our buses are averaging 15 years old. This is 3 years longer than the feds want us to keep them. And we don't have the funds to get back to a 12-year life cycle if we don't make this shift. So that's the justification behind it. Operational be great to continue to spend it, but then we'll have buses which are 20 years old, and pretty soon buses old enough to drink, not to joke, but those vehicles need to come off the street. They're not comfortable. They require a new transmission and new engine, again, at 12 years, which they already got a new one at 6 years. So it was a choice to keep service out there and kind of go a little shoestring, but now that we have the opportunity to reallocate those revenues, we're moving back to a more balanced plan that will help us have better vehicles. So the service we're committed to running it's with a vehicle that somebody wants to actually ride.
So on the federal formula funding, aside from the calibrations, just a quick overview of how that money is spent. We received $12.3 million, typically right around that amount every year based on the allocation split between us, PSTA, and TBARTA. We spend 79% of that funding of $9.7 million in the operating budget. 21.2% of all wages and benefits for our maintenance staff for all modes is paid for through this, tire replacements and the ADA paratransit service. Total appropriation to be used in FY17 you see is just a little bit more. And again, the way that this works is we don't have access to this right at the beginning of the fiscal year. We are at the mercy of the federal government of releasing the funds. Typically, we just signed the letters last week for the FY16 appropriation. So you see how far into the fiscal year it takes. It has taken longer. We're very pleased that it wrapped up right at the end of March. And typically, these funds are not available to the spring of the fiscal year. And again, as you see this recalibration in FY17, we're looking at from $9.7 to $8.7 million shift. It's $1 million differential, or only 69% of that going to operating funds. So we have had an opportunity to assess where we think we'll be on revenues. So far, looking at keeping our expenditures flat over FY16 as much as possible. So now we go forward with a series of key goals to formulate and structure this proposed budget. And as they have been every year, our primary goal is to at least maintain current service levels, reduce no service whatsoever, and we have been able to do that over the past, since I've been here, 4 years, to be able to do that. under Ms. Egan's guidance, that is a directive. We do not reduce service in the coming budget. We look at enhancements, and we'll talk about what those are in a few minutes. And again, we're strictly held to our TDP enhancements, which is non-peak enhancements, which don't require any new vehicles on the street, based on our funding. We'll talk about that again in a few minutes as well. TDP is the baseline for all budget development, so we start with the TDP. Whatever our TDP states for this year, it goes into the budget. We work with service planning to see if there's any modifications, and then we will relay those modifications to you through the budget development process and the TDP approval process. We're looking at more expansion of innovative programs, building on our first last mile on our taxi voucher, looking at other programs that we can implement going into the future. Explore enhancing and integrating passenger application concepts like One Bus Away, Google Trip Planning, and Smart Card technology. We are deploying a major shift into the community of technology, something that we have not done before. As of today, okay. As of today, we can proudly report as part of this and moving forward in the coming year, Wi-Fi has been deployed successfully, active, and live on all of our vehicles today. Thank you. Staff. And that was a key foundational element for us to be able to deploy future technology like you see on the screen today. We need the Wi-Fi on the buses to be able to implement the smart card technology, which is coming. We want to be able to piggyback on that technology and push more technology opportunities to the community to better utilize our services and better opportunities for transportation throughout the county and the region. Continued long-term fiscal sustainability obviously is a goal. I think that is reflected in that 5-year look ahead where the red has decreased drastically over the last couple of years. And again, we want to drift away from a migration from federal funding for operating support. Again, that isn't a given every year. We don't know the exact amount. Obviously, we don't know the exact amount of ad valorem either, but the federal one is a little more iffy. A couple of years ago, we went through that issue with not knowing whether the federal government was going to issue federal formula funding at all. We don't want to get ourselves in a position that we're relying on a revenue source that could go away at the signature of an administration. And again, prepare HART for future growth. We do want to spend funding to enhance our assets, repair our assets, and prepare them for any type of future growth that we may see, whether it be through a new revenue source, whether it's through more consolidation with regional partners, but we want to be able to be ready when that occurs. So key drivers and assumptions. Well, we know our goals, we know where we've been, what are we looking at as far as constraints are concerned going into the next year. Again, incremental growth in operating revenue. The biggest majority of our revenue growth is going to be in property valuation increase. Bus ridership is continuing to plateau. We're looking at a 2% growth estimated in FY16. Modest ad valorem growth. We do continue into FY17 with these, what I call, they're different revenue sources, such as the CNG state rebates, which we use and we pump right back into the repurchase of our vehicles. There is not a necessarily restriction on that funding, but we have set one for ourselves. As we get a CNG rebate, it gets pumped right back into the vehicle replacement fund. We are still receiving revenue from Megabus, Red Coach, and the Hidden River Park and Ride. We lease that to Citibank in the Hidden River Business Park. They pay us an annual fee to be able to park there, as well as taking care of some maintenance issues there on their dime, not ours. I had mentioned earlier we are still looking at a kind of a stagnant growth in capital funding. That isn't for a demand for capital projects within this organization or from the community. It is strictly based on the availability of funding. So we are pursuing more federal grants. As you're aware, we're working on the Tiger application as a joint application for the fare box with Pinellas County. We are also looking at some new grant opportunities for vehicle purchases as well. And that also can include funding for a second maintenance facility for our vans. We're looking at federal funding for. A slowing of community-focused capital projects. What that means is really not a lot of construction, big construction and new transfer centers. It's really that relook inward, using the funding to beef up our assets that we have in place right now, preparing for that leap in growth that we could get with new revenue in the future. ATU and Teamster bargaining negotiations are ongoing. We won't know the ramifications of those necessarily until later in the summer. One maybe sooner than the other. But again, those are unknowns for us right now. Healthcare, the other great unknown. We are spending higher in the last 2 years than we had anticipated. Our new plans that we're putting in place for FY17, which I believe have been discussed with you in prior board meetings, will hopefully mitigate these issues. We are looking at beefing up our internal healthcare reserves to mitigate any possible over expenditures that we may see in this area. But it's something we are keeping an absolutely close eye on. I mean, it's a topic of discussion almost daily. We are really looking at our spending patterns, what we can do to bring those costs down, and we will continue to do so as we move into the FY17 budget. And something that we have talked about for some time, and we are very proud to tell you, we are indeed moving to a performance-based compensation program for our non-bargaining employees going into FY17. So we will not just simply have a 3% pay raise, 4% pay raise embedded in the budget. It will be based on the employee's performance. And the program that's being developed right now is very robust. And it's twofold. It starts at the employee level, the series of competencies that have to be achieved each year. And then we're rolling out the high-level organizational balance scorecard, which is going to drive the organization in achieving your goals and the CEO's goals for the next year, and bringing and coupling them together and ensuring that we are compensating our employees based on achieving those goals or not achieving those goals. So the non-bargaining employees will be held accountable for achieving goals as we move into FY17. Key drivers and assumptions, something that Ms. Egan has stated in the budget development process the last couple of years and the strategic planning process is we want to be an employer of choice. And to be able to do that, you have to invest in your employees. And we are doing that. We're doing that through a few programs. Lynda.com is online training, from Excel training to project management training. It's there and accessible to our employees. Our Capstone USF training program, which Ms. Chenevert has talked to you about prior to this meeting today, is something very big for us, for our employees, an opportunity to get a management certification, leadership certification from the University of South Florida in a collaboration with them. IT certification. I had mentioned before we deployed Wi-Fi today. We are moving to a new infrastructure, a new technical backbone, which a lot of the innovation that we were looking at in the future is going to have to ride on. To do that, we need to have trained employees on this new technology, and we have made an investment in FY16 to make that happen. ESMS auditor training. Last week, we had our ISO audit, which I'll be reporting out the results of that to Ms. Egan later today. As part of that, there is a sustaining effort that has to be held by the organization. It isn't you just pass a certification and you move on. It is built into the regiment and the management system of the org. We have to have our own internal auditors trained. It'll save the organization money by training our own people and getting them certified. We're working on that as well. And investment in the organization. This is great that we're doing all these new programs, but the organizational structure has to be able to sustain those. For the first time, we're opening a project management office, a PMO, which actually is active right now. It will ensure that all projects from any facet or component of the organization get run through with the same process, the same procedures. Performance scorecard I alluded to before, and ISO 14001 certification is something very big and an investment in the organization as well as the community. So other key drivers and assumptions, we talked about these off-peak improvements based on what the TDP stated. This is what is coming before you within the FY17 budget as targeted off-peak improvements. There'll be more detail on these as we move forward, particularly with the TDP update, which I'll talk about at the end of this presentation. Again, no rush hour improvements plan based on the inability to add new vehicles to the fleet. The key pieces, we want to expand the taxi voucher and first mile, last mile. The new Tampa Flex, based on vehicle delivery, that is the FDOT the collaboration. And that, as a matter of fact, is an action item before you today as far as the JPA is concerned. So again, first blush of what we're looking at of putting enhanced service. No decreases in service as our commitment, and additions to service based on the TDP. So how do we achieve all of this? Well, a couple of ways. One, we manage the expectations of the organization. And to do that, just as we've done over the last 4 years, we developed a level of service process where we give strict guidance to their organization that you can't add anything over your FY16 budget without a business case. We're also looking at continued internal scrubbing of expenditures. Right now we have a target of $500 to $1 million we're looking at eliminating from the budget through this scrubbing process, analyzing spending just as we've done every year. This is the third year that LOS increases are being evaluated, but again, if you're asking for a new FTE or asking for additional funding, you have to build that business case. And then we are focusing on one-time, non-reoccurring expenditures. Why? Because we want to keep that 5-year outlook exactly the way it is right now, not red. And again, as long as we make those one-time expenditures, it'll lay the foundation for that support and the growth and HART in the future years. So we're focusing on that in the way into FY17.
And before we move on that last comment, the one-time expenditures, we have focused very strongly on getting as much service out on the street as possible. We're very proud of this footprint. We are clearly at a point that we've got everything out that we can have during rush hour. We're looking at innovative partnerships to get more rush hour service. We're looking at late night weekend type of programs. But if our service is fantastic and no one knows or no one can get to it to use it, it's really not useful. So when we talk one-time expenditures, we are talking the technology investments, which make service easier to use, customer service training initiatives and other things, which are one-time expenditures that make an investment in service. And next year we've got options of other things to do with that money. But these are items which are critical to service support and getting the best quality service out there.
Just the form we use. FY16 annual TDP update. So a couple of years ago, we made the commitment that we would tie the TDP annual update process to the budgeting process. And we have committed to that, and we have done that over the last few years. However, there is an anomaly with the FY16 annual TDP update. And we are actually due for our major update this year. Remember, every 5 years, a major update where a consultant comes in and just completely develops the TDP with us in collaboration is due this year in September. However, we filed a petition for variance to the Department of State to alter or to ask for a variance from the administrative code that requires this. Why? Because right now we don't know what exactly will happen with Go Hillsborough. And that was specifically the catalyst for that request for variance. There is no reason to spend upwards of $100,000 for a consultant to come in and help develop a TDP right now when the whole framework and picture and our operating landscape changes in November, potentially. So we have asked for a variance. We've asked to just do a simple annual update. As you can see by the dates, actually, yes, the date's in here, June 6th. It isn't an expedient process at the Department of State to ask for a variance. FDOT is handling it for us. We are not required to manage this request to the State Department. We are just in a waiting pattern right now to see what happens. We won't know if that variance is granted until June. With a full TDP update in September, it could be an issue if they come back and say no. I don't think that's going to happen. However, we will keep you posted on what information we receive from the Department of State. Even if they do come back and say that there's a variance has been granted, we are moving forward with just an annual update on the TDP. We're working on that right now. So once they say that a variance has been granted, we're ready and done. So that's where we are with the annual TDP update. You won't be seeing, typically in the next 3 budget presentations to the committees, you'll have this TDP element hooked to it. It'll be an annual update that's hooked to it, not the major update hooked to it, as I had mentioned last year that we were mandated to do. So again, just giving you an update on where we are with the annual TDP. And our next steps. Staff is, LOS scenarios are due to the executive team on April 11th. On May 1st, just a little over a month from now, the executive team, along with Ms. Egan, will approve and review those. We have a GOA committee meeting on May 16th with the first preliminary official budget. That's when we will have the revenues pretty much down. The state will have issued its final estimate on ad valorem, and we will have the LOSs built in and so on. June 6th, preliminary budget consideration. And again, by our charter, it has to be approved in the beginning of June so it can reach our jurisdictions for review by July 1st. July 1st, final property valuations come in. July 18th, we have a board meeting to set the not to exceed millage rate. And then in September, we'll have our public hearings for budget adoption and ratification. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, very good presentation. Do we have questions or comments from board members on anything that we just heard? It was a lot. Okay, wow. Well, I just want to make a comment that in the 5 years I've been on this board, the 5-year look ahead is the rosiest that I've ever seen. And that's with very conservative assumptions. So I'm very hopeful and think the assumptions were right in line with what we had done in the past, and I think it served us well. So no other comments from board members? Yes, Mr. Director Jacob?
Hey, Jeff, thank you. That was awesome. I have a question now with fuel costs. As I look back on the expenses, it's 7% of the overall budget. But what are we looking at in terms of the downturn in fuel costs, and how's that affected our budget in the last year or so based on that? And are we having any measures in for any fluctuation within those? I mean, you know, a fuel cost going up 20 or 30% is still a big number. How does that affect us overall?
Fuel has been our friend. This last year, the one reason why the 5-year look ahead looks the way it does was because of the drop in diesel fuel. We saved over $1 million on the prior year's budget just based on the lowering of diesel. As you may recall, we operate under a consortium Fuels Future contract. We lead it for the Bay Area. And we have seen nothing that would preclude even less of a budgeted amount for diesel next year than we had in FY16. Again, very conservative. We are starting to replace the fleet with CNG. But I'm very confident that we will be able to squeak out more savings in this futures contract going into FY17 than we even did in FY16. But we're still keeping an eye on the markets. We have folks that look at it all the time. But we locked some rates, unlike our friends across the bay, that locked really, really early and did not reap the benefits of the lower prices as the year went on. We only lock incrementally, and we wait to see what those fuel costs do and then lock, even if it's a month at a time. That's just the way we like to do it. It saves us money over time. And we will continue that, and we always keep one eye to the markets. But again, fuel prices have been our friend. But at the same time, we can't become too complacent because they're not going to stay that way. And if we consistently build our budgets lower and lower and lower on fuel, eventually we'll have to raise them back up to meet that demand. So we're doing it very cautiously.
Commissioner Beckner?
Thank you. On that same lines, Jeff, are we being more aggressive in locking? I know you had mentioned that you're doing incremental locks for future contracts. Are we looking at potentially longer terms now that the fuel costs are lower and being more aggressive in that nature?
Yeah, not the contract. Where's Mr. Burns? We don't do more than a year because the contract is a year. But yes, as it looks as if fuel costs are increasing. Right now, we're in the process of doing our procurement for FY17. If it looks as if we can lock these prices below where we're at right now going in, we will lock for a longer period of time and not play knowing that it can't stay this way forever. It will eventually increase. So we will consider locking for a longer period of time if we can get those rates under what we're at right now.
Are we still on schedule where we want to be on the transition to CNG?
Yes and no. We are. It is totally based on availability of vehicle funding. I know staff is going to talk about that this morning. We did put together a funding package that you'll see for, I believe it's for approval today, to be able to move forward on some vehicle purchases that we had not anticipated until FY17. So we are trying to cobble together these federal funds that we have to be able to get as many vehicles as quickly as we can. But I will defer that question to operations.
Thank you.
So just one more on the hedging. We can hedge natural gas just like we hedge diesel.
Yes, we are.
So it's the same
Yep.
program.
Yes.
I did have one question regarding the healthcare cost, which seems to be one of our biggest cost drivers, or had the biggest increase over last year. Are we at some point, do we look, so we did make the decision to self-fund a few years ago. Will we get to the point where we start maybe getting estimates of switching back to full coverage and kind of weighing the cost benefit of those two scenarios?
Jeff's looking at me, so I suppose that's my answer. Yeah, actually, that's an excellent question. We spent, and poor HR staff, we spent a lot of time last year digging through this of what are the fees under the Affordable Care Act for self-insured versus going in on a policy. We have about 600 families on our insurance plan. That's a pretty small pool for self-insurance, and as Jeff noted, a small pool means a smaller reserve, so last year was a very uncomfortable year for us, but as the clerk of the court stated in the December delegation briefings to our legislators, her costs went up 35% a year. We were not unusual. But we look at this every year. We talk to our brokers. We talk to our actuarial to get a sense of what else is going out on the market. Does it make sense for us to jump back into being covered with a full plan as opposed to going with self-insurance? So we do that annually. Right now, as bad as last year was, it would not have been better, and we would have had more fees if we had been on a full Cigna plan as opposed to self-insured. So far this year, we are much closer to expenditures. So we've got 2 full months, a little bit of March under our belt, so we're tracking to what we had budgeted, but it's early in the year. We don't know if everybody who had waited for something jumped onto it in January because they had their FSA. We don't know if folks are putting it off. So it's too early in the year really to come back and say that we are okay, but we are infinitely better than we were last year. So, but answer, yes, we look at that annually.
Okay, very good. Okay. Any other questions? Then thank you very much, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you.
We'll go on then to our next presentation on vehicle procurements. And who do we have doing this?
We have a tag team presentation today between our maintenance director, Jim Fetzer, and Justin Bagley, our senior planner. And just a short introduction. At the committee meeting, Director Jacob had asked us, yes, I see 40-footers and 30-footers. What do they look like and what's next? And that is an excellent question, which lines up exactly with where your staff wants to take this organization. We're great with 40 and 30-foot buses. We don't have enough of them, as Jeff was just noting, to meet our need. And even if we did, that's not the solution for everywhere in the county. We've seen fantastic use with our Yellow Cap pilot program. I'll talk about that in my CEO report. We're very excited to kick off first mile, last mile with different vehicles. So what you will see in the presentation today first is the business decisions behind how we procure the vehicles we do, why we've made these choices, and Mr. Fetzer will cover that. Then when Mr. Bagley is speaking on the planning side, it's more of a discussion of how we pivot in the future toward lining up the right service and the right vehicle and expanding the fleet we have. Again, we have our great big vehicles. We love them. It does not make sense for us necessarily add another selection of parts, another platform to maintain. But given that, how do we get to that vehicle so we can be more flexible and dynamic in how we serve our county?
Good morning. Jim Fetzer, Director of Maintenance at HART. Excuse me. Just want to talk this morning about how we procure vehicles for the fixed route fleet at HART. Currently, we purchase the buses off the Florida State Bus Consortium. It's been in place for many years. It allows us to get the best prices because of the volume purchases throughout the state. We have many benefits through this consortium. We have a common fleet. Our entire fleet is Gillig buses. It allows our fleet to be our mechanics to be well trained on working on these buses. We only have one inventory that's required because we have a Gillig fleet instead of multiple different buses. We would have to maintain a large inventory of parts for each type of bus. So it's been a big benefit for HART. It has been in place for many years, and we continue to use that consortium to buy buses. The comparison of fixed route buses and why we purchase the technologies we do would not be complete without looking at fuel costs and O&M costs. And I've developed a graph here of our fuel costs. It's a snapshot from February of 2016 of the three different technologies we have here at HART. The first is diesel. We have hybrid electric, we have CNG, and then I included electric as well just as a comparison because it's an emerging technology. And as you can see, our cost per mile diesel is 47 cents. Hybrid is 38 cents per mile. CNG, 15 cents per mile, which is pretty impressive. And then electric, there isn't a lot of history out there or data to pull from, but the manufacturer is claiming 18 cents per mile for electric. So again, that's based on current prices, and that can change at any time with fuel prices. O&M costs, total cost for technology, again, the three technologies we have, I included fuel, parts and labor, capital, and other expenses. For a total for diesel, $1.58 a mile. Hybrid electric, $2.02 per mile. CNG, $1.36. And electric, this is an estimate, and it's a low ball, $2.03. And I want to point out on hybrid, I have other expenses under the fourth column over. Hybrid, that other expense includes battery replacement midlife of the bus. It's $52,000. On CNG, I included the fuel station cost, which was a major investment up front that you made at HART, but it has definitely paid off. That's amortized over a 20-year period. And then electric, I did not include parts and labor, so that's an artificially low cost. But I did include battery replacement for midlife for the vehicles. There's not a lot of history or data out there to look at, so the $2.03 is really a lowball figure. So clearly, we made the right decision here at HART to go with CNG. It's paid off. I wanted to show the different type of vehicles that are available through the state consortium. The Gillig low-floor diesel-powered bus is the bus that we have purchased for many years at HART. It makes up the majority of our fleet. It's a very good bus. Again, our mechanics are well trained and know how to work on this vehicle. It's served us quite well. The next is the Gillig CNG low floor, which is the bus that we have been procuring for the last two procurements, and we're proposing for purchase today, $488,000. That extra upcharge is just for the CNG drivetrain. There really isn't any structural changes or differences in these vehicles. The current fleet we have now has about 70,000 miles on it per bus, and it's worked out very well. We're quite pleased with the performance of these buses. We're going to be getting 13 more of these buses this summer, and we're proposing to purchase 15 more today. And then the next buses that I'm going to show you are the Gillig Bus Rapid Transit option and the full-blown BRT option. These are just cosmetic changes. They really aren't structural changes at all in the buses. This one, as shown, is $501,000, and the only difference really is kind of a treatment on the front and the back of the bus that shows a rounding off, more of a streamlined appearance. And then at $497,000 is the rounding of the front end. It's a front end cap treatment only. It's about a $10,000 option. And finally, you have the Gillig BRT Plus, which is the full-blown, top-of-the-line Gillig bus for $506,000. Again, it's cosmetic. It's just a front end and a back end treatment and a roof line treatment, and that's about an $18,950 option as well. And then lastly, I included the electric bus. Of course, that's something we're keeping our eyes on. It's an emerging technology. Again, it's, I hate to use the phrase, but cutting edge technology can bleed, and I think it's still at that point, but we're watching it closely. A Proterra electric bus is $825,000. You do have major infrastructure costs. You have charging stations in your facilities that you have to install. You have to have fast charging stations along your routes. So those are major investments. But again, this is an emerging technology. We're keeping our eyes on it. I do have some experience with this at a previous property where we were purchasing Proterra buses, but again, we're keeping an eye on this. And the last thing I want to point out, just to the board, that CNG was the right choice, not only by cost, but by emission reductions as well. Since you've implemented CNG here at HART, you've seen a 16% reduction in your carbon emissions, which I think is commendable. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin to talk a little bit about vehicle sizing, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Hello, Justin Begley, HART Planning staff. I just have a few slides here to talk a little bit about, a couple slides about the buses that we use, and then a couple slides to just get into the remainder of our fleet mix, which covers a couple service types the buses don't do at all, or do well at least. So this slide is just intended to illustrate what we have with our full-size bus and our smaller bus. And there's really just about a 10 or 11 foot difference in bus size, but there are actually some pretty significant differences in function and some minor difference in form, but they really just do look like a more condensed version of the 40-foot bus, other than the fact they're a little older. So we like the buses need to be sized much like a roadway needs to be sized to accommodate maximum usage. So just like, you know, a road is maybe empty during parts of the day or low utilization, when it's full, you need it to perform. So the 40-foot bus is a 30 to 35 seat passenger bus. Seated passengers is where we really want to be. We do have small periods where we may have some standing passengers, but that's really, we try and keep that the exception. The smaller bus there on bottom, you can see, if the majority of our routes do about 23 to 46 passengers, we bought these small buses at a time in which we were doing 8.5 million riders a year. Today, I believe the last fiscal year, we're close to 15 million. So the small buses, at the time we purchased them 10, 12 years ago, they made a lot of sense because we just weren't doing the performance. Today, with the demand we have, those buses, we have a few routes we can use them on, but largely they're becoming obsolete, and I'll explain why in a moment. Just to talk the numbers a little bit, well, if you have a small bus, do you save money? We did some digging on this. I think we knew some of these things already, and a few pieces of information here we tried to get updated. And as I mentioned, the capacity 50% higher on a larger bus. Yeah, there's simply 50% more seats, places to put people. We're able to capture that with only a 7.5% approximately increase in capital costs. This one jumped out at me because, you know, I'd have thought the smaller bus was a lot less expensive than it is, but the reality is it still requires an engine, a transmission. It's just built a little bit less robust. The frame is not as robust and it's a bit smaller. We really don't capture much, if any, capital cost savings for that. So 50% more capacity at only 7% less cost. Finally, the point that drives home the difference in the economics of these is the FTA defined useful life of a full bus is 2 years longer than a small bus. So we can reasonably operate these vehicles longer than a small bus. Well, there's got to be a difference from a small to a large bus. Yes, there is a modest fuel and emissions difference to a small bus. I think you're talking about a 30,000-pound full-size bus versus a 22,000-pound small bus. Yeah, you're going to have a modest fuel difference there. That's largely been shrunken with the move to CNG, however, because the cost comes down on there. But operations and maintenance-wise is very similar. The cost to operate, maintain, supervise these vehicles is essentially the same. The last slide on buses really just speaks to, the small buses as they've aged have not held up very well. They've worn out a bit faster. We've gotten some small bus specific complaints that have caused us to take a second look at those vehicles. Also, we're required, federal law, to be sure we keep our assets we need to ensure that our assets are not all centered in one part of the county or another, and we accomplish this through rotation. So we need to be able to rotate our vehicles throughout the service area And when you have sub-fleets like this, if you have a very busy route, moving a small bus to it is really, it's not a good solution, but we do manage. That 50% extra capacity on the larger bus, even if it's on a lower performing route, at least now we have some room to grow, and we've certainly experienced that over the last 5 years, having that extra capacity to absorb the additional demand. And then finally, in the past, we've had local bus routes that have gone into places where a full-size bus may not have been operationally sound. That's really no longer the case. As I'm going to talk about now, we have a new solution, or over the last few years, we've gotten into new vehicle type to serve these neighborhood areas. And that's the 23-foot cutaway here is, it's almost looks like maybe like a hotel shuttle or airport shuttle, if anybody's seen it. You'll see these vehicles operating in places like Brandon, South County. We have them in Northdale and South Tampa as well. These are last only about half as long as the buses do, but the cost is lower, so it's affordable to cycle these through more quickly. And in terms of sizing it to demand, there's often room on these vehicles to accommodate more passengers. We do experience near capacity or at capacity during certain areas during the PM peak in the afternoons. And then the last three vehicles you see here are the fleet mix that we use on our paratransit service. That's the complimentary service we provide to individuals with disabilities who are within 3/4 mile of our service area or of our routes. The top is a Dodge Caravan that's been retrofitted for use in paratransit service. We're in the process of getting away from those vehicles. As mentioned on the procurement that's going on now, the MV1s, which is the middle vehicle here, provide us a lot more flexibility while being able to do similar trip type, but they also get us very good range being on CNG, and also the ability to do that curbside wheelchair that we were having a problem with on the Caravans. Finally, you'll see the cutaway vehicle here is the same vehicle type as the one that operates on the Neighborhood Flex, but it's got a different configuration in order to accommodate 2 wheelchairs and then a little more room between the seats, so people who have a harder time getting around, maybe have a walker, can get onto these vehicles and get positioned and off as well. So shorter trips with those than the others. We can do shared rides, and we can group trips together, so there's an economy there that's gained. And that's going to wrap up the presentation of Jim and mine, and we'll be able to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, Director Beckner?
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. So back to my question I had earlier, with this procurement that's going to be coming in front of us, where does that put us on schedule then for where we want to be in our transition from diesel to CNG?
Obviously, we want to move as quickly as we can, as possibly forward. Right now we're at 15 buses on the in-service delivery right now. We have 13 more coming this summer. This order will put us at 15. That's roughly about 1/3 of our fleet. We'd like to accelerate that if at all possible, because we're obviously saving a lot of dollars by operating CNG. Our paratransit fleet will be fully transitioned over here with this purchase, so we're moving ahead quite quickly.
So then we should, Ms. Egan, then, because I think when we originally started this, we were on a 7-year transition period. Is that right?
So technically speaking, it ends up closer to a 12-year transition, because we made the choice, instead of trying to retrofit the vehicles, because what could go wrong with that, right? That we would just go ahead and start procuring the CNG. We pushed off some procurement, so we went a year or two without getting extra vehicles. We went with a big procurement. We'll get back when the final date will be. This is, I believe, we're accelerating our schedule about a year or two now, but we'll get the final date back for the board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Director Jacob?
This is really great. It really kind of brings a lot of things into perspective. I mean, you answered one question I had in terms of, using the 40-foot bus, and how does that limit us in certain areas where, a 40-foot bus can't operate effectively on the kinds of roads. So that was terrific. In terms of the purchases, you're saying it's a year transition with the purchase. And once the bus arrives, what's the amount of time it takes from acceptance and delivery of the bus to get it out on the street and operational? I'm just curious in terms of getting it.
Within a week. We get it on the road as quickly as possible, so within a week.
Very good. Any other questions, comments? Yes. Director Vance.
You had mentioned earlier that we required to do a rotation of the buses, and the 30-foot didn't always meet the needs when we have to put in the 40 where the 40-foot was. Are the HART Flex buses exempt from that?
So I'll try and speak to this. The HART Flex vehicles we only have a handful, I believe it's less than 10. And in terms of an exemption from that rule, I don't believe we hit that threshold now to where we only operate them in a certain small confined area. So we wouldn't have the ability to move those, let's say, onto other places in the county other than these small designated areas. The single vehicle type, I can tell you they're not dedicated to that one particular area. I think they kind of naturally just rotate through these areas when they're assigned each day.
Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate the presentation. The next part of our agenda will be action items. We have items A through E that have gone through vetting and presentations at the Government Administration and Operations Committee. Do I hear a motion to accept all of those, or do I have any folks who would like to pull them from a consent resolution?
Move to accept.
Okay, all right, a motion to accept items A through E. We had a second. Any discussion? Well, let's vote then. All in favor of A through E, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, went through unanimously. Well, and then the item F is the approval for settlement for the, that came through the Claims and Litigation Committee. Are we prepared to do anything on that, or?
Historically, the board acts on the recommendation from the Claims Committee. Given the sensitive nature of some of the items going on in the claims, it's a little more challenging to have a full conversation.
Okay. Okay, I get that. There was some background material to look into. So unless there's any objections or questions, do I have a motion to approve item F?
So moved. Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Went through unanimously. We have the chair report, and again, the chair had to leave on business, so we'll go right into the Chief Executive Officer report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, we are Wi-Fi. We're totally Wi-Fi. So you see at your stations today a smartphone wallet, which includes a card for how to use the Wi-Fi, and earphones, because of course we want you using the Wi-Fi but not sharing what you're watching with everybody. So those are the two items that we have out there in our promotional our push this week to encourage folks to use the Wi-Fi. So far, so good with reception and also really strong response from our passengers. So I just want to point that out. Of course, the legislative session has ended this year in Tallahassee, and I think we expected to end up where we ended up, which is with a lot of new friends, but no appropriation for fare box. We will continue to work with our delegation through the summer. We're also working on our Tiger Grant, which I believe has gone through the second draft, and we'll be bringing that to some level of update back to the board. It's a joint application with PSGA. We're not aware of any other Tiger Grants going on in Pinellas County, and we received a letter of support from the mayor's office last week, so we are well on schedule. Just a reminder, these are hyper-competitive grants. Tiger's threshold dropped from $10 million down to $5 million, and last year there were 20 times dollar-wise as many applications as there was funding available. So we will give it our best effort, fingers crossed, but continue to pursue other funding items, which takes me to the next topic. The FAST Act, recently enacted by Congress, opens up several grant opportunities for HART. One will be more technologically focused, and we're going through the process with our lobbyists to determine should we continue to pursue Farebox or should we look at other technology improvements. The grants are carving out very much a smart cities focus of how can we be smarter with transportation, and we will take full advantage of those. FAST Act also includes an item we're very excited about, which is bus and bus facility grants. We will pursue the bus grants this year for our fleet. Again, we still have buses at 15 years old. We're almost a poster child for keeping your buses and trying to use them efficiently. So we'll pursue the bus funding this year. Next year, we'd like to come back and pursue the bus facility grant. The feds require a 20% match from the local area, and they can cover up to 80% of a new facility. And I cannot overstate for this agency and our region how important another facility is. We are full. We are restriping in East Tampa to fit more buses, but this does not give us additional maintenance capacity. So we can park 10 more vehicles there, but we can still only process 8 vehicles through preventive maintenance or up to 20 vehicles in some configuration in our garage. We must find a second facility. The 2017 budget will include funding for a facility review, so we can start lining up to pursue either federal funding, talking to our partners at the state, or even going it alone. But our ability to meet the needs of this community hinge on a second facility. We could get a second facility today, add 30 new buses into service, and still not have enough vehicles to meet demand that we see for the larger vehicles. So we will continue to focus on getting that second facility. Now that I have preached about that, we are, of course, not limited only to our larger buses. In January, this board, you authorized us last year to kick off our Yellow Cab pilot program for paratransit. It's been a huge success. As you're aware, paratransit and van costs have been going up month over month. January was our first month of contraction year over year in 5 years. And this is with about 1,300 trips on Yellow Cab. This is unprecedented in transit. Folks like it, folks are using it, and they are not just using it for short trips. We have actually dropped our trip length as folks have migrated over to Yellow Cab. We had over 2,000 trips in February, and van growth was flat from the previous year. So people like it. Complaints are down on this type of service, and it's letting us stretch our dollars further. So look for us to continue to bring programs like that forward. You're aware that HART is leading with FDOT a premium transit feasibility study, specifically our large region, but also Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough focused. We are in our last round of meetings with the stakeholders on the TMA, and we'll be bringing a scope back to the directors of the MPO. We'll bring an information item to you as we do with any procurement that HART oversees. We bring it to you so you understand where we're going. The HART board is, of course, the appeals body. As we go through this process, if a vendor is not happy with what we've done in the procurement, then you have to make the decision where we go. And to preserve this process, again, we've historically not had our board involved in developing scopes. This way you are impartial and it protects the decision-making process. We will, of course, bring you updates, and if any board member would like a specific detailed presentation, let me or Lena know, and we'll get on your calendars to get you that information. Jeff talked a little bit about our ISO 14001 certification. We will be the first transit agency in the state to get this. There is no higher environmental management standard in the world. We're very excited, and the team's probably ready to get certified because you've been working so hard on it. So Jeff came back horrifically jet-lagged in the best possible way last week and jumped straight into the audit. So thank you to the entire ESMS team for working on this. Staycation, our program with the high schoolers and junior high students. Month of March wrapped up, and we're at 55,000 trips year to date. That includes 3 days of April. This is 20,000 trips more than last year. So just based on that, I'd say our outreach has been successful. We'll keep this going through the end of the school year, June 10th, and we'll keep you posted on that. I'm sorry I'm talking so much. I'm wrapping up with the fantastic launch of the Perry Harvey Park yesterday. It's a new park, city of Tampa, close to Encore, also very proximate to Marion Transit. If you have not gone there, you need to go. Not only does it have the Bro Bowl, which just sounds cool, it's gorgeous, it's a fantastic facility. We supported this yesterday with riding free with your family. We did not argue. If your family didn't look like our family, we didn't care. We share the love, and we will have numbers on ridership for that. Rescheduled from Saturday with a rain delay. We're very excited to participate in the opening of the park. And that, Madam Chair, concludes my report.
Okay, any questions or comments, board members? Okay, we will now go to our general counsel's report.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. One observation to start with, I'm glad I did not wear my yellow dragon tie. I would have clashed with Jeff. I see he got one when he was in China as well. Two things, one on the agenda, one not. The item on the agenda is the approval of the expenditure of a hotel stay for the chairman. He was in D.C. attending a National League of Cities meeting, presumably pursuant to the support from the city of Tampa, stayed over an extra day in order to assist with legislative efforts to support the Tiger Grant and otherwise promote HART activities. It is an expenditure consistent with the requirements of 112 Florida statutes, and I assume pursuant to staff it is within the parameters allowed in terms of the numbers, and we will not reimburse him for his video games.
Do you need a motion for that, or is that something that can be taken care of?
Yes,
without
ma'am.
motion?
We do.
Okay, do I hear a motion to, reimburse the travel expenses for Chairman Suarez. I hear a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, the second item I'm passing out is our HART public comment policy. It's something I've been meaning to mention. We are very fortunate at HART. The people who come down here to make public comment are almost all civil and to the point and reasonable. I've served on other boards where that is not always the case. So I would like to caution you, the public comment at the end of the meeting is a public comment, not on items on the agenda. You have a public comment at the outset that deals with agenda items. You, of course, are free to engage in any colloquy you choose, but generally speaking, I would discourage that, and one thing we do not allow is a colloquy between the speaker and the audience. So I just thought it would be good for you to see the policy that we literally hand out. It's on, well, it's at the beginning of the meeting when you sign up, so you will know what the public comment policy is and can avoid getting into some rather riotous discussions, which I've seen elsewhere. And that's it, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. I guess moving on in the agenda, we have, our packet had some committee reports in the back. We had reports from the representatives from the MPO and some status reports in the back. And if you have not had a chance to look those over, I highly recommend that. And we have now the portion of our agenda set aside for that general public comment. And I have two folks signed up. First would be Mr. Gary Cloyd again. Mr. Cloyd, welcome.
Thank you, Gary Cloyd, Connect Tampa Bay. I had three questions that I submitted last Wednesday, and the first one was already answered. So I thank you to the CEO for that. The second one is, back on March 18th, the Safety and Security Department had a tabletop exercise for the Operations Center. I believe that was an emergency management kind of exercise, so I wanted to find out how that went. And the last question is, now that you have 11 months into the next session, how is your travel to the DC area going to help you from a federal and state mandate and support?
Okay, I think what our general counsel just mentioned is this is the period for comment. If you have any questions of staff, I think the appropriate time would be, maybe you can catch them afterwards or set up an appointment. Or Ms. Egan, do you have a comment on that?
Well, and in previous meetings, Gary, what we've done is allow folks to step out and speak with staff. So regarding the tabletop exercise, right behind you, Dara Shenevert, is our acting chief, which has safety and security rolling up to her. And as far as DC travel, is Caesar back there hiding behind Ricky? See, there, Caesar Hernandez can speak to you about our DC plans.
Sure.
So they will be available to speak to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cloyd. And then we have Mr. Henry Spells. Welcome, Mr. Spells.
Hello, everybody. Well, I do have a comment. Obviously, my comment will mean I got my bike helmet on my backpack, meaning I'm pretty soon getting closer to have my bike. Now, I'm just saying what I told Mr. Suarez a couple of HART meetings ago, that, HART should now start to design ways to get, a bike especially made for disabled people, to be able to put on a bus. Now, I know the bike racks are made with 2 slots for 2 bikes, but my bike has 3 wheels. I've seen my bike, and it's a very bright green bike. Almost bright as the green as the Metro Rapid bus. That's how green it is. But my comment is, there's got to be a way to be able to accommodate my bike, because pretty soon I won't be using my crutches a lot, especially if I want to, ride my bike to the bus stop, put my bike on a bus, and then go to another neighborhood and just ride it. Say I want to, I live near university. I want to be able to go somewhere else without having to ride my bike to that other place, because it's going to take an hour to get there, even though I know the buses take an hour still to get there. But yet, the buses are doing a good job doing it. So I figure I could be able to get a 3-wheel bike on a bus and be able to go ride, where I, could take the bus all the time instead of having to walk. I could just, ride my bike to the bus, try to get my 3-wheel bike on the bus, and then go to another place like that. However, I still applaud you guys for being the best bus service around in Hillsborough County. You guys are better than a Link bus company, even though I seen they got some good new buses in there, raggedy old ones.
And Henry, direct behind you also is Jim Fetzer, who other side. There you go. He's our director of maintenance.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he will be available to speak to you about bike racks and get some more information from you.
Oh, good, because, he and I are going to become acquainted because I have an idea. And then I'll still talk to you about more things after this meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spells. Always a pleasure. Okay, any other members of the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll go down to old business. Is there any old business that we need to bring up? Any new business? Okay, any comments from board? Okay. We have back in the back a calendar of upcoming actions on 8/1. And I'm seeing the end of the agenda. We are adjourned. Thank you.